Joining me now from Beijing is Qinduo Xu. He's a senior fellow with the Pangoal Institution, and he's host of CGTN's Dialogue Weekend. We're talking a lot about COVID-19. Let's talk about the economic piece of this. What's the COVID era doing to globalization?
Well, obviously, there are some setbacks to globalization, Mike. For example, some of the projects were delayed or even canceled. Some of the businesses were disrupted, around the world. Basically, you take a look at the United States, European countries, China, ASEAN countries, etc. But of course, the economy are trying to recover from the attack of the pandemic. And unfortunately, we are having this second wave, in particular, in European countries. But if you look at the history, for example, in 1918, 1919, this, Spanish flu, we call it. But anyway, you don't know much nowadays. You don't read much about from our history textbook, for example. So that, in a sense, means the impact could be large, but it could be temporary. Just like this around this COVID pandemic, yes, there's a great impact, but it could maybe not lasting that long in terms of economy, in terms of globalization. And so, at the beginning of this COVID-19 pandemic, of course, some countries, some companies were talking about, resupplying their products, their resources, even talking about, basically getting away from China to set up factories in other countries. But it's easier said than done. And, sometimes there are also elements of politics. So let's say, for example, in the U.S., the government would urge their companies, to, because of geopolitical consideration, to stay away, to move away from China. But look, there is also an organic globalization developed mostly in an organic way. You set up a factory, you have several elements to consider. For example, the cost of living, and the cost of labor, and also whether it's easy to supply in terms of the resources, whether it's close to a market, etc. So you cannot do it like in a planned economy. So I would say in general, yes, we are probably having a new version of globalization. For example, in many parts of the area, I would say, rather than U.S., people are still focusing on globalization. You see China and the European Union, they are trying to finish their comprehensive investment treaty this year. And China, ASEAN countries, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, they are trying to actually sign the so-called RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, another regional free trade agreement. So I would say globalization is still ongoing, probably in a different shape with some differences.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that neighborhood piece is important because we've just been reporting on Wang Yi's trip through Southeast Asia, 5 countries. Obviously, China wants to keep the Belt and Road Initiative moving forward. What has the pandemic done in terms of impacting some of these projects?
Well, obviously, those projects on the first place, it was delayed, just like the project in Thailand, the highway project or the high-speed railway between China and Thailand. That's in a sense, it's understandable because there's this pandemic. People simply have to stay indoors. But I would say, it gives a new urgency in terms of those projects. That is, you see, it is, in a sense, is pushing some of the projects probably in a higher speed, I would say. For example, the cooperation in terms of, health, the sector between China and the BRI countries, Belt and Road countries. For example, the vaccine, China, the not official statement, but some people were talking about, in terms of distribution of the vaccine developed by the Chinese side. We know 9 most advanced vaccines around the world, 4 of them are from China. So they are talking about what about this earlier access to those vaccines for BRI countries like ASEAN countries, like Thailand, like Malaysia, etc. So in that sense, there will be more cooperation. And because of the pandemic, people will also probably will focus more on the supply, on production supply of the medical equipment, on protective equipment, in case there is something similar like this in the future.
And you know what's interesting, we're talking a lot about the second wave hitting a number of countries. China, obviously, the first country to have to deal with this coronavirus. And it's so interesting seeing what's going on in Qingdao right now, because clearly the virus and the economy are linked, and China intervening, moving as quickly as it is to test 11 million people, it recognizes that it's got to really kind of tamp down the virus if it's going to keep the economy vibrant.
That's true. That's from the beginning. Remember back in March, in February, March, the Chinese side decided to lock down the entire city of Wuhan of 11 million people. That was a very hard decision. Even at the top level of the Chinese government, there was a hard discussion because there's a large population to be affected. And of course, immediately the whole country was locked down in a sense. People were asked to stay inside, basically to, as long as you step out, you put on a mask to try to basically cut off the transmission of the virus. Thank God it worked, and the whole economy at that time, for a short period of time, was basically came to a halt. No business activities in 2 weeks' time. But then, of course, that's a price China paid, and then it proves that's the right approach. Because basically there was right now there's a local transmission hovering around zero. In Beijing, Shanghai, including Qingdao. That's mostly you see that's from flights coming into Qingdao, and also even the people affected is without symptoms, not serious, not in grave situation. So yes, because winter season is coming, people are using masks, and hospitals are asked to to be more alertive about anything, whether there will be a second wave. But in general, people are confident that things will go on as normal.
Qinduo Xu, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.